No, YouTube. No. Hello, and welcome to the Hawkeye Hotspot Podcast here on hawkfanatic.com. It is Thursday, July the 6th, a little after 9 a.m. Central Time, joined, as always, by Scott Docterman of The Athletic. We're going to talk some Hawkeye sports here. I was thinking about this morning because I've been fighting off the attraction to this new social media platform. I won't say that I don't need it yet, because time will tell if I do, because I use it for work, and if I need it for work, I'll use it. But I don't want another social media platform, Scott. Enough. Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. Now we got Threads. I'm not much on the TikTok or Snapchat or that stuff for work, but I've got multiple that I use for work, and I don't want another one.
I agree. I did join this morning. I didn't even know about it till this morning. I saw that everybody, hey, I joined Threads, and I'm like, okay, well, I guess I'll do the same. And because, it's been frustrating dealing with Twitter lately, dealing with the whims of the wreck of the Elon Musk Gerald. But it's just been so. I don't TikTok. I do have it. I don't go on there except for when my wife's like, check this out, which is about 8 to 10 times a day. And, sends me a link and some funny video, and okay, thanks. that's the lion's share of that. I do go a little more on the others, but no, it's, I don't know, man. It's the way of the world. I haven't joined Mastodon yet. I don't know if that's a thing or it's gone the way of the Mastodon, but, but I'll be on Threads. I started and I posted 2 things, and we'll see where it goes.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see what happens here. If you would think that Twitter would figure out how to run smoothly, but I'm not confident it will. So we'll see what happens with Threads. I'll probably break down and join it, and then it's kind of like Instagram. Instagram's probably like my third platform right now, just because, which is weird because I take photos, so you would think that I would use that more, but the process of getting the photos on there, as it's only a mobile app, I guess I could do it online, but it's a pain in the ass. But anyway, I digress. We'll talk about Hawkeye sports. Hopefully everybody's having a grand time on Threads, and maybe I'll join you at some point. As per usual, Scott, as we were recording last week's Hotspot podcast, we had a commitment. So there's a good chance, if you're watching us on YouTube, keep an eye on Twitter and Threads, because you may see some Iowa Hawkeye news. It's kind of it's a tradition like no other here. We record and news breaks during that on our beats. But Iowa is now up to, is it 18 commitments in 24?
Yeah, we're at 18 right now after last night. So there's been quite a few, in the last since their main visit weekend. They've had is it 6 now?
I think it's 6, yes.
Yeah, and one like the day before. So
right, yeah.
So that's what happens, that these things go in waves, and but this was at least based on their official visits and who they offered. It's been about as productive of a little run as they've had, and I think they're not quite done yet. There's 3 more that visited, 2 more you kind of expect, or at least one more seems pretty much imminent. The other one is, they're in the driver's seat, I think, and then one other one is probably I don't know. I mean, we'll just see. It could happen. Probably some of it depends on the fall. If they're 8-0, then somebody's going to want to hop on that bus.
Yep, still room in the class. Not a ton of room, but there's room there, and I think as we move along here, we're going to see more roster turnover, just, with the transfer portal, NIL, things like that. So it's always been fluid, Scott, but it's going to be more fluid now, just based on roster needs. Like, you may go into this season 23 thinking, okay, we're set at this spot position, and then things change. And now you got to go find somebody in the transfer portal, or maybe a late bloomer in this, in the 24 class. Iowa's done a good job of adjusting. And I will say this, and I don't want to be labeled as a hater by anybody else. Most people, or no, I won't say most people, there's a faction of people that feel I'm a hater when it comes to Iowa football. But I will say that I think the class, last I looked, was ranked 9th in the Big Ten. So you're talking middle of the pack. I think 247 and On3 both include USC and UCLA in the rankings, because this class for them, the 24 class, will be the first recruiting class when they join the Big Ten. Rivals doesn't include them for some reason. I don't know why, other than Rivals isn't what it used to be, I'll say.
Yeah.
But so, and I had somebody in the mailbag ask, why are they middle of the pack? Why aren't they doing better? This class, and I think there's like dueling narratives here. You have like the people that like, okay, the guys they're getting now are fallback recruits. And I hate that term, but these are guys that they, a group of these guys they didn't offer until June. And, so those people are like, well, what happened to the other guys that they were offering before? Well, they committed elsewhere, or they like another kid better, or things change. Again, fluid. But the thing is if you followed Iowa recruiting and Iowa football for a long time, you realize that the rankings really don't matter. Well, I won't say they don't matter. I think they matter less than maybe they matter elsewhere. And just because you get, Michael Burt and Gavin Hoffman in June doesn't mean they're not going to be better than some of those recruits that they had higher up the board that they offered earlier. So I guess the message is, don't get too wound up in what the rankings are now. Just kind of, especially at the tight end position, trust the judgment there. We could go down the list of guys they've gotten at that position late in the process that have worked out really well and better than some of the kids that they were after earlier in a given process that went elsewhere. So kind of a convoluted statement there, but I've just noticed there's kind of you're making a mistake this is my opinion, if you say that these are fallback recruits. I mean, technically they are guys that are farther down the board, but I think it's also somewhat disingenuous to say that Iowa is hot on the recruiting trail, because a lot of these kids, or a good group of these kids that came in, were offered late and came on an official visit, and Iowa, to its credit, closed the deal. So I don't think either one is, completely accurate is what I'm saying, Scott, but I'm okay. I don't stress one way or the other, because it's a developmental program. And if they see potential in something, and we could go down the list too, right? Joseph Anderson, 1 year of football, raw talent. I'm sorry, I'm babbling, but we can go down the list. We'll see what happens.
Well, it really kind of goes to what Iowa has done in this class as to why it's ranked 30th, I think it is. I saw it on 3 today after getting Rashad Godfrey. And I think when you look at their earliest commitments, they're in-state guys from small towns who didn't have a lot of offers because they didn't go to all the camps. They didn't compete in that type of environment. When you have Cody Fox, who's a 4-star, and Derek Weiskopf, who's a 4-star, if they were out there, if they were, hey, we're going to all the camps and we're getting offer after offer after offer, they're going to zoom up the boards. It's just kind of the way recruiting works. And it's not cool. I don't like it, but it's the way it works. And so you just got to deal with it. Cam Buffington's another one from an 8-man school, in Winfield, Iowa, and Preston Reese is a dual threat, everything at Monticello. And they all committed a year ago plus. So they're guys that you just look and say, they're not going to blow up on the scene. They're the guys that they secured immediately. And then you go kind of down the list and from there, and there were guys that started getting offers in the spring, and there were competitive offers. And then there's some guys that you just look at them and you watch them, and whether it's Devin Kennedy, Jimmy Kennedy's kid, who just started playing 1 year of football, or Joseph Anderson, who I think is going to be really freaking good, plays for a team that was 1-9 last year and has all the tangible gifts you're looking at, except for, add about another 50 pounds, which I was capable of adding on to somebody like that. I like a lot of the aspects here. It is developmental. There's no question. And I think a lot of times when we start grading classes, it's all about the 4 and 5 stars. And then it's about kind of the building momentum around kids that, hey, they haven't committed yet. And they have Iowa, Wisconsin, Michigan State. And then, here comes Notre Dame with an offer. And because everybody's trying to get the last couple of guys. And next thing you know, then their profile builds and they grow up the ladder. And then, so overall, I am not one bit concerned. I think they're 30th. They'll probably end up somewhere between, 30 and 35. Does that sound probably about right with this class? And 9th in the Big Ten, outside of Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, and USC. Is there really a whole lot of difference in the rankings? I mean, there is, but we'll see what happens on 3rd and 5 from midfield in the third quarter. That's really what's going to matter. So I don't know. I like the rankings. I follow them. I think they're interesting, but I also don't follow them so religiously that, man, I can't believe Iowa's only 9th in the Big Ten, because, who's in front of them, who's behind them. They're about mid-pack. They're about everywhere you expect it to be. And when you start throwing in, Maryland's always really good because there's a lot of talent in that area. Nebraska always does really well in rankings, but they don't do very well on the field. Now they have a new coach, so we'll see. USC is automatically going to put one spot between them and Iowa. I mean, they're just going to always be higher than Iowa. So am I concerned? No. If they were 12th, I'd be a little bit more down. But I think they've got, based on the what I viewed of these players and just, huddle videos, whatever, they fit and they're good. And they're good fits. They're better than what Iowa got, say, 10 years ago. When Iowa had that real dip, and they were constantly 7 and 8 wins, you could see it with the talent disparity. I don't see it with these guys. I think there's enough. There's 8 to 10 starters out of this class, and I think that's pretty cool.
And it's important to remember that the rankings are based on what these players do in high school or in combines and things like that. It's not a ranking for them in college. They still have to go to college and produce. And, 5-star kids, it's pretty easy to tell. They don't all make it, but you can tell, okay, this kid is got a really good shot. If he stays on the trajectory he's got, to this point, he's probably going to be at least a starter in college. And then, maybe beyond that, all conference, whatever, and then possibly an NFL player. But we see programs develop NFL players from all over the country at different positions. It's just so hard. There are so many players. I work for Prep Red Zone for Iowa, and I spend a lot of time watching huddle videos and scouting these kids. And there are kids, Scott, that I'll pop a huddle video on. He's not, kids maybe got maybe an FCS offer or something like that. And I'm like, wow, this kid has a chance. There are so many of those kids out there that you could say, the starter kit's there, but where do they go? Do they go to the right college? Do they get the right development? I mean, it's a really, really difficult formula to go from, high school to where are you going to college to how is this player going to develop? We see it here all the time with guys that are, maybe a 3-star behind a 4-star or a 2-star behind a 3-star, where that doesn't matter once we get to college. So it's usually, it's an overreaction both ways, right? If Iowa had a class ranked number 4 right now, people would be overreacting to it. And it doesn't guarantee that 4th ranked class would be any better than the 9th ranked class.
Well, yeah. I mean, as you know, when you look at the class of 2005, the best players were the 3 stars, the 2 stars.
Yeah.
Those are the players that shined. When you look at, I remember looking back because I wrote this once, but TJ Hawkinson, small town, wide receiver, going to move inside to play tight end, ranked the number 66 tight end overall by consensus. Number 1 was Isaac Nada. Fast forward 3 to 4 years, TJ Hawkinson was the number 8 pick overall in the draft, and Isaac Nada was the 7th round pick of the same team, the Detroit Lions. So, it really, you don't know who's going to grow that extra inch, who's going to develop, because maybe they didn't get a very good development, when they were in high school. Maybe they were in a small town. Maybe they were in a city that didn't have a lot of resources. Maybe they just, they hit a growth spurt. Maybe they were just overlooked, and it doesn't take much when you look at some of these programs. It's like, hey, we're going to take 3 offensive linemen, and you've got your 3 lined up, like Iowa's got its 4 lined up. But what happens if there's a kid from, take your pick, in the small South Central Iowa, and all of a sudden, hey, between their junior and senior year, they grow 2 inches, gain 20 pounds. And instead of being 6'2", 220, they're 6'4", 240, with the potential to be 6'5", 300. And then all of a sudden they're Spencer Brown, they go to Northern Iowa, or Trevor Penning, who goes to Northern Iowa, and they're, NFL starters. And it's like, wow, how did you miss on them? Well, they're late bloomers. They went to single A or 8-man schools. It happens all the time in our city. They get overlooked, or we're already full at that position, and we don't want our competition to know about them just in case. So it's a weird vibe all the way around with recruiting, and people should know. It's like, this is the 25th year in a row where you look at this class and maybe you're not impressed. And then all of a sudden, Drew Campbell played just like Jack Campbell, or Michael Burt turns out to be just like Sam Laporta. Both were low, 3 stars with barely any offers. And, oh, by the way, they're, 2 of the top 34 players picked in the NFL draft. It's an inexact science. You're comparing players at a formative stage of their lives. And then, conversely, there might be somebody who's really polished, and they went to all the camps, and then they played at a school with a lot of resources and good coaches. And then all of a sudden they've already hit their plateau, and they're just guys, but they're a high 3-star. They play for a suburban talent, team with, their parents can afford all the camps and the coaching, and, they're just a guy, so, it's so inexact. Honestly, I really like Iowa's class. I think there's a couple of players still out there that you kind of wonder about, Titus Crump, from, out in.
I was thinking about him yesterday. I was going through some film, and I'm like, what's going on with this? It's kind of like the kid from, was it Assumption or North Scott, that had offers, and now he's walking on at Nebraska in the 23 class. I can't think of his name. I apologize, but I think he had, he may have had a Nebraska offer with the previous staff, and now ends up walking on. And that's the thing. There are only so many seats on the bus. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. Was that David Borchers?
Yes.
Okay. I knew I had his name.
Pleasant Valley?
North Scott.
North Scott. I knew it was somewhere over there.
Right. Yeah. And, you look, we've talked about the incoming walk-on class. I'm really high on it. I think that, and you look year after year after year, what they do at safety, offensive line, occasionally, a defensive skilled player, up front, or at linebacker, maybe a wide receiver. You never know. I mean, they're going to, Rusty Van Wetsinga ended up, walking on at Iowa and had a full scholarship to go play linebacker. Well, you're going to play at the higher level and you're going to get a chance to play right away. And then of course his brother commits, who I think is a really big deal. So, but anyway, there's a lot to me that I think in this class is worth really being excited about. I really like Reese Vanderzee, again, far northwest Iowa. You don't get much further than that. And it was Iowa State. If I was to compare him to somebody, maybe a Todd Blythe type who is from Indianola, who's in that central Iowa area. So he's going to get a lot more play. But I really like Reese Vanderzee. You can see, all right, he might be a Brody Brecht. He might be a Todd Blythe. And if that's the case and he comes to Iowa City, then you got a steal and you got a guy who can start for you for 2 to 3 years. That's what it's all about. So Brevin Dole, I really thought, he was kind of injured this spring, but I think he's got a chance to be a special player. And you know what, if you miss on somebody, there's always next year. And then there's always the transfer portal, as you said. The attrition Iowa's had this year has been pretty good. Especially since the first kind of exodus in December. But even then, you look at some of the other Big Ten schools, it's been heavier. So I think this program's in a really healthy spot. They're getting the guys they want. And if next year they need to supplement them, they've proven that they will do that. That's what they did this year.
It's interesting. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and Iowa obviously does its own evaluations and figures out which guys fit best in its program. But, and not really but just interesting. They got 2 tight ends in this class, but they didn't offer Jacob Simpson from Johnston, who's going to Minnesota. They took offensive linemen in this class, but they don't offer, Kyle Rakers from Dowling, who's going to Kansas State. So it really, that kind of points to they're doing their own evaluations and taking the guys they believe are going to fit best into the program and help them. And they do. Again, you don't want to go overboard with, every one of these kids is going to develop and turn into, because it doesn't happen. Iowa, there are guys that we've looked at in past classes are like, this guy could be the next insert the player, and it doesn't work out. So, you evaluate, you do the best you can, but it's an inexact science. And I think Iowa's pretty happy with this class. You could certainly see the potential here. And this is, to me, pretty much a standard Iowa class. Some raw talent, some talent. I mean, Cody Fox to me is one of the better offensive linemen in the region. Tom Lemming has said that. He's been watching and evaluating guys for years. He loves Cody Fox. So again, sometimes, like you were saying, Scott, guys commit early, they're in-state guys, and maybe people don't give them the credit they deserve. But they did a really good job bouncing back in state after the previous cycle of not doing as well. And I think that'll pay dividends. You got some versatile athletes in this class that can project at multiple positions. And that's always good. You can find, where they fit best once you get them here.
Right. Oh, for sure. And, as you mentioned, last year was a disappointing year in state, no question. I mean, when you're losing the battleground in central Iowa as badly as it did to Iowa State, you've got some ground to make up. And they did. They went right back at it. And, and there are some fascinating guys, as you said, like Jacob Simpson from Johnston, is ranked higher than a lot of guys that you wouldn't be, and he's a Minnesota guy now. That you didn't have an offer, and you don't really hear about him. Grant Bricks is the interesting one to me, and you probably know a lot more than I do on this, but just never seemed to get a lot of traction with Iowa. And a lot of schools offered him early. Iowa just kind of slow played him, and then next thing you know, just fizzled.
Next thing you know, he's got an Alabama offer.
Yeah, right. And it's like, oh, what happened here? So I don't know what happened there. It's strange, but is it possible that Cody Fox could be better? Yeah, for sure. You just don't know. And so, it's inexact. I look at the running backs as a really inexact part of this. When you go, what's the difference between Brevin Dahl, between him and Xavier Williams, who they bring in from Indiana, Ty Kozad from Muscatine,
Titus Cram. I know he Cram's kind of could be either side of the ball, as well too. That may be part of what is holding up his recruitment.
Yeah, and then you look even at the players that Iowa currently has. Well, I guess some of the others, like Preston Reese. What's to stop him from being, he could be on defensive back, he could be a linebacker, he could be Ed Hinkle for all we know, and they're just going to have to figure that out. And I think, what we saw early on with him, Weiskopf, and Buffington is like, let's just get these guys on the bus and we'll figure it out later, and Weiskopf, you feel pretty good about being a linebacker. Buffington, probably the same thing. Reese is a little bit like, well, I don't know, and he's kind of fallen down a little bit, everybody's forgotten about him. I think this fall, he's going to be remembered pretty fondly in Northeast Iowa high school football.
Pretty amazing. Winfield Mount Union with two FBS level players in this 24 class on the same team, 8-man. That's pretty amazing that they're able to do that. Abram Edwards is a tight end, son of Clay Edwards,
right?
Is heading to Army.
I remember those days. I lived in that part of the world when it's him. And you want to talk about surprising now, just think about what it was 30 years ago when you had Jess Settles and Clay Edwards and Bert Lappy, who played, I think, at UNI, and they had a really good point guard named Eric Rawson, who went to, I think, South Dakota. So you talk about a terrific group of athletes in that part of the world. And that was amazing. But I know Abram Edwards really wanted Iowa. He camped at Iowa, a couple different places. It didn't look like he was going to get that offer. And a lot of it is that they're full. Once guys commit, it changes the landscape, and or they're waiting on guys to make their mind up. And that's just, you just got to do what you got to do. So, I don't know, Rob, if they pick up, the last couple here, which at least two of them, I think one for sure, Jalen Watson, nephew to Fred Russell, I think is one that they're going to.
When's his announcement? The 8th?
The 8th. So it's in 2 days. So Saturday.
Saturday. What's he doing Saturdays? Doesn't he know we need our weekends off before football?
Well, exactly. It's like, why don't you just do this like Friday morning instead? But him, the Plano, Texas, you can pronounce it better than I can.
Chinny, Chinny Chikwe.
Yeah.
Is that right?
It reminds me of the wide receiver from Ohio State 15 years ago, Jimmy Chekwa or whatever.
Yeah.
So if those two pick Iowa, then they're at 20, and then it's Xavier Lucas is the other one. And I think that's the one that could go multiple directions, probably in the Big Ten, unless, and this is what you always have to fear for somebody from that part of the world, is what happens if Florida State, Georgia, somebody down there offer, then you might get stuck. And then
that's really the worry until December, right? With some of these guys that are from farther away.
Yeah, absolutely.
Especially.
Yeah. Rashad Godfrey was, he's unranked so far, picked Iowa last night, only one visit, had Boston College and Duke and USF, he's from that part of the world, and he picks Iowa, and you feel good about that. But, you get into in the fall, if he has a good season and somebody looks at him, and, that's when you're going to be crossing your fingers and stuff. And then James Reeser for, the quarterback from Jacksonville, you got to think the same thing. He's all in today, but, you just got to be cautious. And I think all recruiters are that way, because last year that was a real kick in the nuts. Late with Caden Proctor, because I think
you just got to know that that's part of the game, man.
Yeah.
Until it's signed, and now I think they can. Did they change the rule where they can get out of the letter of intent? I thought there was a proposal for that.
Yeah,
if the coaching change, maybe.
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah, and that's why Joe Toussaint's on the move again in basketball. He's at Texas Tech. Anything's possible here. It really comes down to, Rob, taking care of your players once they get there. Do a good job of raising them, making them feel like they're important, that they have good voices in the program.
Like right when they get on campus too. You don't want to break them down into if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
If you know, you want to bring them in. They're young. This is their first time away from home. You want to let them feel wanted. You can do that and still push them.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you just want them to feel like they're in a great direction. And if they are, they're going to stay with you. You take care of them along the way. If they become a pretty good player, all right, find ways to compensate them through NIL and they give them bigger exposure. Ultimately that loyalty works both ways. And most players are not vagabonds. Most players would love to be at the same spot because, if they're in 6 a.m. workouts now, sweating and bleeding and getting sprains and then through the fall, through the winter, doing it all over and over again, making friends, just make them feel like they're appreciated. And, for the most part, they'll feel pretty good about their relationship, and they'll do whatever it takes to make this a 40 to 50 to 60 year commitment of their lives.
Just going through here for people's knowledge that don't follow recruiting very much. We were talking about the team rankings earlier on 247. This varies too based on the amount of commitments you have. So it's really can kind of switch pretty quickly. Now that we're this far along in 24, there's less movement, but especially early on, there's more movement. Your top 4 teams. Recruiting wise, 247, Ohio State, Michigan, USC, and Penn State. I would expect that to be the top 4 most years. Mm-hmm. And you look at it, according to 247, Ohio State has 4 5-stars and 11 4-stars. They have 15 of their 17 verbal commitments are either 4 or 5 stars, Scott.
Yeah, exactly. And then, and then you got Michigan with 25 commits already and 17 or 4-stars. So, it's, what do? But it doesn't guarantee their class is going to be, you see the gap between where that class is now and where Iowa is. Mm-hmm. There's a good chance by the time this class is done that Iowa closes that gap. And that's how Iowa's been able to compete. Well, for sure. And, and for the most part, I think I like the average a little bit better for, an average ranking or whatever.
Yeah.
Even more than the total points. Cause that's kind of, okay. So Minnesota has 24 commits. Iowa has 18. So therefore, but then you look at the average number and Iowa's higher. In the end, it doesn't really freaking matter. It just matters on, does Jack Campbell intercept that pass and does Riley Moss tip it? That's really what matters. And it's hard to distinguish that in this type of environment. I really think, though, when you look at Ohio State, how many of those guys are going to end up staying at Ohio State through either the NFL draft or through the end of their career?
They're more like Kentucky and Duke in basketball.
Yeah. I mean,
they just get these guys, they leave early, and then they just reload with more of these guys.
Yeah. And they got 17. Let's say they get up to 20. Let's say they had 1 in each category or something like that. So they get to 20, 5, maybe 6 or 3-year guys. Let's say 5, 7 or 4-year guys, NFL caliber, and 8 probably leave. Just something like that. It's
there's one at Iowa now.
Yeah, right. Caleb Brown, a 4-star wide receiver, and is it because he's a washout or is it because, hey, I just didn't like it? That's hard to say. I mean, it's individual.
And again, it's an evaluation, right? He may be in that receiver room and he may be practicing saying, I'm better than some of these guys that are ahead of me. But the Ohio State staff is like, no, you're not. Mm. So what do you do then? You look for another place and hopefully you get, that opportunity.
Yeah, and I'll say this, that when you look at Marvin Harrison and Ibuka ahead of you, and you think you're better, you might want to work a little.
He may
harder.
not think he's better than those guys, but maybe a little guys, maybe elsewhere on the depth chart. Hopefully he doesn't feel he's better than Marvin Harrison. That would be delusional.
Yeah, right. I would not. I would not take. I would question a lot of his sanity and his and his thoughts on that for but pretty much anything. If he says, "Hey, Cade McNamara is a better quarterback than C.J. Stroud," I'd be like, "You said you're better than Marvin Harrison."
It's going to be interesting if USC can expand its recruiting into the Midwest. I mean, they get kids from around here. But I'm wondering now with UCLA, USC more than UCLA, obviously, it's a better program. But I'm wondering if they're going to start, coming into Chicago, starting to go in Ohio, Michigan. It's going to be interesting to see what USC can do. A blue blood. We'll see what Texas and Oklahoma do in the SEC. They recruit at such a high level anyway, just like USC. But if they can expand that their footprint, man, that makes them even more dangerous.
Yeah, it does. What I'm most anxious about out of all these realignment moves is with USC in particular, because it is a blue blood. At least Oklahoma and Texas are kind of in their own footprint.
Yeah,
the southeast part of the country, in their case, southern part of the country. USC is going to have to come to the Midwest and play, and Mideast and everywhere else, and at least once or twice they're probably going to have to play in rough weather. And how are those players going to handle going to Camp Randall, to Kinnick Stadium, to Minnesota, Illinois, wherever, Nebraska,
it's not warm anywhere in November.
Right.
In Big Ten.
Yeah. Last year at Minnesota was the most miserable day I can ever remember. That was just, and it just floored me, just mentally trying to wrap my mind around the fact that 2 miles away, there's this beautiful $2 billion dome. And we're outside while these college kids are playing when it's the wind chills.
Wait till USC or UCLA ends up in the Pinstripe Bowl.
Some tells me that they would rather pick a 6-6 Rutgers or Maryland over 9-3 UCLA or whatever. But I'm sure the Holiday Bowl will get back in that, although they hate UCLA and they're sued UCLA, so that one might not happen. But anyway, that's when you somewhat the rankings you throw out the window, Rob. When 4-star tackle from Arizona goes up against 3-star defensive end from Cedar Falls, Iowa, and it's 3rd and 5 and it's 1 degree outside, who's tougher? That's what it comes down to. Because if you've both been well coached, if you both have good talent and you both have good technique, then who's tougher repeatedly over and over and over and over again. And so that's what Iowa bases it on. That's why Iowa takes, offers low and rates and tangibles very, very high, higher than everybody else. And it's really worked for them. When it's one of those things where, I think, somebody I was talking to, I think it was Kirk, actually talked about how we'll overlook an inch here, an inch there, and maybe that's, but we figure it'll win us most games. Now, the ones where it doesn't is when Amani Hooker, as a new player, jumps up with both hands. If he jumps up with one, maybe he tips a ball and they beat Penn State, stuff like that. So anyway, there's a small margin for error and there's a small margin for victory. And, playing in the Big Ten, it's not easy for anybody. And I think when you look at these rankings, you'll see you're swimming with the big fish here, and you just got to make sure that you're a piranha.
I've got a little insight on this class, Scott. So I do the Prospect podcast, and last year I got caught. I waited too long. I couldn't get everybody in the class or the people in the class that were willing to do it. Some kids beg, tap out, don't want to do the podcast. I get that. But I wanted to start this summer with this 24 class. So where do you start? Cody Fox, right? He's the first commitment in the class. Mr. Howe, I respectfully decline my invitation. I'm not a podcast guy. And I was like, cool, Cody, I appreciate your honesty. down the road, I'll interview you and we'll do a written story. He's like, cool, that's perfect. That's what I'm into. Great. So we went to Michael Burt, the new tight end from Omaha. I thought that was an interesting story. You can catch that podcast on our feed. Grew up a Nebraska fan, like a big Nebraska fan, and chose the Hawkeyes over Nebraska. And it was interesting just talking about, his uncles and stuff are going to have this conflict now. They've got all this Nebraska gear, but next year, and Michael said he will be in Lincoln Black Friday, decked out in black and gold. So, cool story. And I would encourage people to check out. He's a good basketball player, good baseball player, really good baseball player, really good all around athlete. Good size. I think they got a good one there. And I like Gavin Hoffman too. I think they did really well at that position.
I did too. And I thought, you also had Eric Garner, who picked kind of a shock, picked Texas A&M as like sight unseen.
That went quick too, man. That one hit me out of nowhere, but I should know better than that.
That was an NIL move. It sounds like,
at
least a heavy part of it. But you look at the films of those guys and you see the starter kits, you see the potential, and that's really what Iowa's about. Because Iowa, as much as people want to think, well, why can't you go out and get X, Y, Z? It just doesn't work that way.
Those are funny, right? Well, why wouldn't a tight end want to play at Iowa?
Well, because
I get that.
Yeah.
But maybe they're not, it's not a good fit for them.
Yeah. I mean,
or maybe there's a bunch of money down in College Station.
Yeah. Or a couple of years ago, I was really questioning it, when the two Bellevue kids went to Auburn and in Oklahoma. I thought, man, that's weird. But, I think overall, if you just got to look at your best opportunities. And Michael Burt, as you said, what a mature decision to make, because when you go with your head over your heart, that really is a smart move. And he felt, Iowa was in on him early. You could tell the story a lot better than I can. And yet, even though he loved this team growing up, that was the best fit for him. And he got an offer. He even had a visit, and he still picked Iowa. So that's a very mature decision. And I think overall, you've got to, a lot of these kids, and even the ones that grew up Hawkeye fans and go somewhere else, I mean, they're not supposed to be ostracized guys. They're picking the best ones for them.
And Nebraska did get a good in-state tight end in Carter Nelson. So and Minnesota got Jacob Simpson. So all the teams that used the tight end in the current Big Ten West have done pretty well at tight end in this recruiting cycle.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know. It's fascinating. It's going to be, I think Iowa's probably pretty happy with what they've got. They'll probably work on a few others just as hey, let's just follow this guy. Maybe he's a preferred walk-on. Maybe if they blow up this year, we'll really take a close look at him and go from there. And but overall, I think they had a pretty solid group. I mean, quarterback's going to make the group. I don't, we know how fast Jacob Reeser is, but he picked Iowa at a very low ebb in recruiting and has stuck with them. And so I think but will he be good? Well, we don't know that.
And that's the thing too, Scott. People think that, okay, we got the verbal commitment, we're good. No, you've got whatever it is, 5 months left to December. You got to keep recruiting these kids. You got to still keep selling them. And I think a big part with Reeser, and I'm not saying he's waffling or he's going to go somewhere else or, but there's a potential that he has a good senior year and schools closer to him come in, NIL, things like that. But a big part will be Iowa showing progress on offense this year and showing him, hey, this is the direction we're heading in. You can see how you fit into this. And that all helps.
Yeah, for sure. And, as you mentioned, a lot of times when there's kind of I don't know if it's an outlier, if you want to call Iowa an outlier in Jacksonville, Florida, but it kind of is for a position like this, then teams in that region, whether it's SEC, ACC, or otherwise, will look at it and say, okay, it's between us and Iowa. we could just show a little bit here, here's our offense that fits you a little bit better, and then go in and try to steal. And especially when they miss out on a guy, or they're still looking, maybe they like him better than one of their guys, it's recruiting is a never ending cycle. So,
and a team could lose a player to injury or the transfer portal and say, hey, let's go after Reeser. He's our guy now. So got to do that, man. You got to still recruit to the end.
Yeah. And, I'm sure, when you look at, in Iowa, in this case, quarterbacks from Alex Padilla to Carson May to Marco Lainez, probably looked and said, all right, Spencer Petras is graduating and that'll be my turn. And then all of a sudden, no, they're going out and they're getting Cade McNamara and you're going to have to deal with it. He's our number one. And then, Padilla leaves, which, that happened actually before everything, before the bowl game. Joey Labus, you're going to have to compete. Deacon Hill come on in, and he committed to Fordham on Christmas, and Iowa kept recruiting him. So, there's just a lot there for, you have to be aggressive, and Iowa has been aggressive. That there's kind of a misnomer here attached to Iowa at times with recruiting, and you look at the players they picked up. I mean, Deshaun Parker, he committed to Virginia. They were still on him. They snagged him. Deacon Hill, they needed a backup quarterback. He went to, he was going to Fordham from Wisconsin. No, they were on him too. So they're pretty tough on some of this. I mean,
Old Seth Anderson away from hometown Georgia Tech.
Right. He's an Atlanta kid. Well, played with, was right there with Tyler Goodson's high school and was able to get him there. Caleb Brown, Ohio State made sure he didn't go to Oklahoma or Texas A&M. He's stuck here. Rusty Feth, first day on the market. They were in check. Nick Jackson, Iowa and Oklahoma. That's pretty fucking good. And I know I'm not trying to tout Iowa or anything like that, because we can be negative if we want to, but damn, look at that class. Look at the guys they got. Eric All, are you kidding me? I mean, he's an NFLer. So Iowa went after these guys, got them. They turned their offense around. They needed a linebacker in the worst way, and they went and got one of the best ones available. They did a good job. And so, yeah.
I thought they used the transfer portal excellently, if that's a word. Is excellently a word? Yeah, I think so. By addressing your positional needs. And I think that's how you do it going forward. We need a couple receivers, need a couple offensive linemen.
Yeah.
Need a veteran tight end.
Right. Bring back 3 of your veterans, 2 on defensive line and 1 at wide receiver. They need to be compensated through NIL. They were, so now you're looking at this going, okay, that they're stabilized. It had in the past, before NIL, before the portal became the portal, you're looking at an uphill climb. You're looking at, okay, you got some pieces to fill on defense because Lucas Van Ness is going to the NFL and Noah Shannon and Joe Evans and John Wagner are off. And then, how do you fill Jack Campbell and Seth Benson? You got Jay Higgins, but then who? And, on offense, no Nico Ragaini, Brody Breck's playing baseball. Who else are you going to get? I mean, you're begging junior college guys at that point to come in and play. Offensive line, quarterback, for crying out loud. They were able to go out and get it and execute a plan. And for the most part, from the players I've met, Rob, I think they fit Iowa. I think they're exactly what Iowa wants. So, kudos to them. Of course, it doesn't matter until they're in Happy Valley in September, or when they're playing at Camp Randall, and then Minnesota's a close game at Kinnick, and they got to extend their, beaten Minnesota's ass streak since at home since 1999. That's what it really shows up. But for this point, you got to give them an A for this offseason,
And we'll touch on this real quick because we'll have plenty more time to talk about this young man. But as we talked about with Cody Fox, the first man is on the bus in the 2025 class, and Joey Van Wetziga, who Scott mentioned, his older brother, Rusty. His dad, Rusty, is the coach at Pleasant Valley. Joey's been a guy whose film I've watched, because I heard about him last year when he was a freshman. I'm like, really? At a 5A? But just I encourage people to put the Huddle film on. And I think center, defensive tackle, we'll see. He's got half of his high school career left. Doesn't matter. You get that guy on the bus and then figure out where the seat is after that. Really good start to 25. Love this kid. Iowa was his only offer. And to your point earlier, Scott, no matter what he does the next 2 years, he's probably going to fly under the radar from a recruiting standpoint because he's already committed to the home state school.
Yeah, he kind of reminds me of a player who was from about 10 miles up the road who did pretty much the same thing as between Iowa and Iowa State, and then decided, I'll just stay home and wear number 65 and then go be the best center in the country and be a first-round draft pick. Because he's got that same kick-ass mentality, and he's got the same tenacity and toughness, and probably can get bigger than even Tyler Linderbaum can. Mm-hmm. The first thing Kirk looks at, if he sees center, that's where he's going. It's hard if he's around, that's where the direction it's going to go. But I love the kid. And honestly, I played against Rusty, his dad, in high school. His dad was
you did? I didn't know that. Yeah. You may have mentioned that before. I think you did.
Yeah, Pleasant Valley, it was a pretty good year for the MAC. I mean, Tavian Banks and Bettendorf were pretty good. So there's some other players. I'm not going to get into glory days and shit, but I will say this, that if his dad was about 3 inches taller, he had been playing Big Ten football and not being All-American at Augie. He was a badass in a lot of different areas. So it doesn't surprise me at all. And I know a few years ago, I had a conversation with him about some players, and, he pretty much said, yeah, my son Rusty's, a college player, but Joey's the one that's going to be the really, the outstanding one. So getting them both, there's no problem with that. Plus the Quad Cities are going to be a battleground with Bielema,
Yes.
And, that's not that far from Champaign. He's from Prophetstown. He's attacking the state like nobody has in that position. So saddle up and go get your guy. And they did. And in 6 years, you're going to see him on a Thursday night on NFL Network.
And we'll see how Iowa does with the other top players in state for the 25. You got Nick Brooks from Kennedy, offensive lineman, Thomas Meyer, tight end from Clear Lake, and Malachi Kirby from Waukee are three of your top in-state guys in the 25, along with Van Wetzinga.
Yeah, Kirby's going to be a tough one. I would say I probably would see him. Brent Kirby's kid.
Iowa State probably has an in there, I would say.
Yeah, so I don't know if who knows. Go after him, see what happens, or at least let him say no early and move on. Don't waste your time, but make sure that if there's an opportunity, give it a shot, see what happens. We've seen it before. Players, from Michael Burt to whoever, go get your guy.
Yeah, no doubt. We'll see how this class comes together, and we'll talk more about that as we move forward here. Probably a good time to take a break here. We've been rolling on the recruiting, but we'll take a break here and then come back and talk some other Hawkeye-centric storylines. Want to let folks know that support for the podcast comes from Systems Unlimited, celebrating 50 years of providing services to people living with disabilities and mental health needs throughout East Central Iowa. A list of their services and upcoming events can be found at sui.org. That is sui.org. Thanks so much to Systems Unlimited for the work they're doing and supporting the podcast. We're going to hear from a few more of our sponsors and be back on the other side with more Hawk Talk. And we're back on the Hawkeye Hotspot podcast here on hawkfanatic.com. Where we want to go, the gallery at the John Deere Open, or John Deere Classic, excuse me. yesterday, Scott, on Wednesday, July the 5th, the Pro-Am. Caitlin Clark did her Arnold Palmer impression.
I didn't get a chance to watch much because I'm kind of knee deep in this series of about 5 stories. I got 2 of them done yesterday, but
damn work getting in the way of entertainment.
I know, but the gallery following her around. I mean, it's it on a smaller scale, and albeit local scale, it's Tiger Woods-esque. I mean, she is.
It's just amazing. You look at the thing at the iCubs yesterday. It's amazing, man.
What it was like when she went to Nebraska.
Yeah.
I mean, they averaged like 6,000 fans and 14,000 showed up. And then after the game, 2,000 fans are still there 45 minutes after the game getting autographs and pictures, and half of them are in red. She is the most transcendent athlete in our lifetime at the University of Iowa. There are great athletes, and I'm not going to say Jack Campbell's not a great athlete, or Spencer Lee isn't, or Keegan Murray obviously is, and all those players. I mean, you feel lucky to have covered them and watched them, but she moves the needle in a direction that nobody can match. And she's somebody that just changes conversations, the game. Everybody wants to see her in action doing anything. It's remarkable. And it's a lot of fun. And no matter what happens this year, no matter if they win it all or they fall short, she's a figure you just can't take your eyes off of, whether she's playing golf or taking a logo 3.
Yeah. And I don't doubt the reports from down there that she signed autograph after autograph after autograph down at the Classic, that she, interacted with fans. She just continues to carry herself in it's a professional way, I guess, for lack of a better term. She cares, and she's doing so much for women's athletics. Mm-hmm. It's just the impact she has. That's why and I agree with you, when you talk about her legacy at Iowa, how enormous it's going to be, it's beyond Iowa. It's national. It's worldwide. Mm-hmm. It's incredible to see. And just the way she handles it, to me, is amazing. She does not, you don't hear anything, her getting upset with some people that are, requesting her time. She does it. She understands the importance of what she's doing.
She's the perfect role model for sports, not just women's sports, not just women's basketball, but sports, period. And she handles herself just professionally in a way that I don't know that you can expect anyone to handle herself the way she does. She's effortless. It's fluid. There's no, there's fun banter. It's not forced. I mean, I don't know how to run out. I'm going to run out of superlatives here to describe her, but there's just nothing that she does that, is wrong. And, on the court, she gets feisty, and so what? Let her. Well, I do. I'll throw a club, when I'm on the golf course, I'll say an F word if I miss a shot in horse, let alone basketball, so it's, she's remarkable. And, when you go and I heard anecdote after anecdote about her from way back that, at Ohio State, there'll be girls, in Buckeyes t-shirts, but they want Caitlin Clark to sign it. And because even though she's the opponent, they're cheering for her. And I had, a Nebraska fan when all hell was breaking loose with the Nebraska fans and me over the Caitlin Clark's experience. I had a woman say, "This is stupid. I'm wearing red, but I am cheering for 22." And it's just, that's transcendent. That's something that is unusual. She's, at the women's college sports level, she's Michael Jordan. And, I don't know. I think Nike needs to still come out with the Air logos, but
I had the earlier experience with her, I think, that I've mentioned on the podcast before, where I saw her play at City High her senior year when she was at Dowling, and interviewed her in the old gym at City High after that. That's where their locker room was. And I had my youngest with us, Audrey, and I forget how old she was at that time. She was probably 8 or 9 at that time. And got done interviewing, and Audrey was standing there next to me, and she recognized her, said, "Hey, how you doing? You like basketball?" She could have just been done with my interview and just kind of said, "Hey, thanks," and walked away. But she took the time to see that there was a young girl there. And this was before she was, a household name. And so it's not something she's just developed now. I think it's something that's in her.
Yeah. I look at her. The only other athlete that comes to mind is Niall Kinnick. I mean, we know the stories. Obviously, he born and died way before we were born. But you think of the stories, the impact that he had, that he was making, that he would have had beyond that. And I look at Caitlin Clark, and I think just similarly, not only in the sports arena, she's going to be great. She's probably going to be an Olympian at some point. She's certainly going to be the number 1 pick in the WNBA draft when that happens. But the charisma that carries her, and she could have a career well beyond basketball when that time comes. And maybe that is in the political environment. Maybe it's not, but she handles herself so well that she could do anything with her life. And and she resonates with so many fans that there's not a fan who meets her who has a bad experience. And if they do, it's probably their fault. So
yeah, really, what's the knock on her, Scott? It's the way that she gets into it, the emotion she shows on the court. And that's bullshit anyway. I mean, what do they want her to just not react? Yeah. And I get it, the stuff with the, with the, the face thing, whatever the hell that was, and all that. And I get it. Some people don't like that. They're old school. They just I enjoy that. I enjoy the emotion. I enjoy, athletes that are emotionally invested and competitive. The competitiveness in Caitlin Clark, I think, is probably I don't think people understand how competitive she is.
Absolutely. And for all of the niceties about her as a person off the floor, she's a killer on it. She will put you in the grave over and over and over again in any way possible that she can on the court. And, it was interesting listening to Haley Van Lith talk about that moment, the whole "you can't see me" stuff. And that was that wasn't to her, that was to the trainer, but it looked like it was to her. And, and like the Angel Reese stuff, I'll let Caitlin handle the way she wants to handle it. The only thing I didn't like was, hey, at the end of the game, you're kind of shoving somebody's nose and shit. So you just kind of want talk all you want during the game, but when it's over, just kind of let them up easy type of thing. And that didn't happen there. But other than that, hey, that's part of the game. No need to get too big. It got way blown out of proportion, I thought. And so, but overall, and you spill that over into tickets. Like I've mentioned before, my wife is a season ticket holder, and I renewed them. It was $50 extra this year for 2 tickets.
Yeah, let's transition into that conversation, Scott. That was announced last week. I think it was after we got off. Was it Friday?
Friday was the day you could renew.
Okay. I don't remember talking about this last week, though, that they had. I'm trying to remember. When did that come out? It came out on June 30th, which was Friday. So it was after we recorded last week. I didn't think we had talked about the new men's basketball tickets remain the same. Women's went up to me. So you're looking at $195 for adults for new customers, $160 for faculty and senior citizens, $75 for youth. The renewal price $175 for adults, $140 faculty, $60 for youth on renewal. To me, still a bargain.
Yeah, I think there were 125 or 150 last year or whatever it was, and so now they're, I know I had to spend more.
And I know that there are renewals that are going to be scalped.
Yes. And individual tickets might be as well.
But it's what? How many home games? What's it work out to? What, $10-12 a game, something like that?
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking at let's take the new team. I mean, you've got what, 9 Big Ten games and another 3 or 4 non-conference games at home, something to that effect. I mean, I'd have to look through the whole thing, but either way, I mean, for an entertainment like this, and especially to watch a Caitlin Clark, a team that went to the championship game last year, the most exciting athlete in college sports. I mean, I do maintain, now, I would never publish this pool because it wouldn't come out fair. But if you were to ask on a national basis, have you heard of Caitlin Clark or Caleb Williams, the USC quarterback who won the Heisman? I would maintain Caitlin Clark has more name recognition. And that's, not me being provincial in Iowa, but I think just because maybe it's a litter of name, but also just the fact that she's just that transcendent. But when you look at, it cost us, I don't know, $50, $100 more or whatever, but she's just, you gotta pay it to see her. I mean, she's just the biggest game in town. Now, the one drawback was, my wife wanted to change seats, and that's not going to happen because the renewals are so high, and the people wanting new tickets, the demand is so high that it's like, not this year. so we're stuck with the same tickets and behind the basket, but I don't sit there anyway, because I told my wife it feels like work. So she brings like a friend or a family member, or maybe our daughter this year, I don't know.
Yes, and that season will be interesting to watch, and it's amazing to think that there was a time that they had curtains there to drop down at Carver Hawkeye Arena, because to make it look more full when the crowds weren't as big. Now, no need for the curtains anymore.
No, not at all. I mean, I've got most of the schedule here, through FOIAs, so I know kind of who they're playing and where they're playing. And there's only like one more date, and it's Iowa State, oddly enough, but they are playing Iowa State. I checked on it just to make sure. I said, okay, Iowa State's the only one that I haven't gotten, just to make sure, because if you don't play them, it's kind of a big deal. And they're like, yeah, we'll play. But the 6th, they opened the 6th against Fairleigh Dickinson. They play the 16th November 16th at home against K-State, the 19th against Drake at home. They go to the Gulf Coast Classic. December 2nd, they play Bowling Green. The 16th of December, they'll play Cleveland State, and there should probably be a home game, Big Ten game somewhere around there too, and then they'll go into the Big Ten season. So,
where's the Des Moines game?
It's December 16th.
Okay,
doubleheader, Cleveland State and Florida A&M, which is not the best opponent in the world. It gets to go to both Iowa and Iowa State, and last year its net was 359.
Not good.
361. So yay, they're gonna go to Des Moines, and hey, at least they don't have to change hotels. They can go to Des Moines and Ames both,
for ass kickings and money.
Yeah, that's the important thing. I mean, they're gonna get $100 or something like that, so $100,000.
Let's finish up, Scott, with a story you published today. Who do Iowa fans want to see the Hawkeyes play? Fan picks for each sport. Not surprised that. I'm not gonna ruin the surprise. You tell people who Iowa football fans want to see them play. It's really a shocker.
Yeah, I'm really surprised that Iowa fans would like to see him play Notre Dame. That ranks, I don't know, on the surprise scale. It's kind of like, yeah, I'm surprised the sun came out this morning, that type of thing. It wasn't even close. I mean, I think I had like 115, responses. It was one of those things at the end of the week. I'm like, it's coming up, weekend, blah, blah, blah. What do you guys think? Who do you like to see play, and where would you like, maybe where you'd like to see him play? Notre Dame blew out everybody. Now, there were a lot of other responses, as you can imagine. Colorado got like 5, Washington, Missouri, Alabama, LSU. And I think people want to see some of those games on the road. I think that's pretty cool. But Notre Dame was mentioned quite a bit. And there were some interesting spots: Soldier Field, Las Vegas, Dublin, Ireland, the Coliseum in Rome. And most wanted a kind of a home and home. I think that would be really cool to go to. I've never been into a game there at Notre Dame Stadium, but there's a location that I was kind of intrigued with, that I have been for a while, and that's Munich, Germany. And it doesn't have to be Notre Dame. It could be anybody. I brought up one time, just kind of tongue in cheek, Wisconsin and Iowa during Oktoberfest in Munich. That could be pretty interesting. But I think, Munich is, to me, is very fascinating, because I don't know if you saw last year when Tristan Wirfs Buccaneers played the Seahawks there, they sold that place out like that. It was just, and like this year, I think they're going to Frankfurt and it's sold out. Germans have a big passion for American football. And I figure, that'd be have a lot of pluses for Iowa, maybe some cooperation between Bavaria and the state of Iowa, and in commerce, and then Iowans for the most part are, I can speak for myself, certainly is, German is the largest ancestral group among Iowans. And there's, you can have some, how about some more Schnitzelgruben? For a clump. But anyway, so I don't know.
What's with the expanded Big Ten and everything, it's nice to dream, and it's nice, but at least how things stand now, it's going to be hard to add a marquee non-conference opponent as long as Iowa State is on the schedule. And because you don't see them going back to an 8-game schedule, do you?
No, I don't.
Big Ten, I mean.
No, there's no reason to. I mean, because you're getting a lot of money from the TV companies, and they want to see good games, and they want to see games that they can control all the time, which are Big Ten, not Big Ten ACC or whatever, which falls under other. Now, there's probably going to be some more cooperation between the Big Ten and Notre Dame because of the NBC agreement. And the NBC is going to want to get Notre Dame, to play more Big Ten games.
It's probably going to be Michigan, though, and
Purdue and Michigan State, but also, it could be in Iowa. I think Iowa could do something like that once. I think, one time Iowa can say, for the same amount of money that we get for a home weekend, we could go to London or Munich or Soldier Field and play a one-off, and maybe do it in week 0. And I think with an expanded playoff, you could get away with that if you're playing a marquee opponent. If you're playing Notre Dame on week 0, in a neutral site, okay. And then, and then there's more than just, there's competitive factors, but then there's also the responsibility that Iowa feels to its donors to, because there's a lot of people in Iowa City that make a lot of money off a home weekend. And if you take one of those away, the hotels, the restaurants, donors lose a lot of money. So they could do that probably one time, but you can't do that more than once. Or they replace Iowa State. And that's not something that's, at least it was palatable. It wasn't palatable for Barta, and it wasn't palatable for Ferentz. Who knows? But so can that happen once? I don't see more than once, unless the Big Ten says we're going to demand you do something different, but they're never going to do that. So, or the Big 12 becomes the Mountain West. Which I still don't see either. I think they're still going to be a highly competitive conference, maybe not with the prime number of teams, but that was just one sport that I mentioned. I don't know if you have any ideas. You certainly pipe up, but wrestling was one that had some interesting thoughts, and part of it was the grapple at the gridiron, and then wrestling at that Texas Rangers ballpark in Arlington, and Grand Central Station about 10 years ago in New York City. So it's lend itself to, somebody else did mention the Coliseum again in Rome. And I'm like, well, why don't you have Mount Olympus while we're at it? But I'm like, what about Alcatraz, man? I was out there breaking the rock, Iowa wrestling against Stanford, or Battle of Gettysburg, with Penn State. I don't know if you want to be on a little round top doing that, but yeah, and then a duel at a military base. That's something I definitely could see happening.
Yeah, for sure.
Or, wrestling Navy on an aircraft carrier. Iowa would be all in on that.
Yeah.
And I also
they've done it for basketball.
Mm-hmm. No, exactly. Imagine the Navy, but Navy wrestling team, or go to Fort Bragg or someplace for Army. They
wrestling too. You could bring multiple teams in, and you could make an event out of it.
Mm-hmm. Go to the USS Iowa out in LA. Do something like that. I think it'd be fun. And I don't even know if USC and UCLA have wrestling teams, but I know Stanford does. But
I don't think USC and UCLA do, but I could be wrong on that.
Yeah. And I also brought up, by the way, on another note, I'd like to see Northern Iowa and Iowa reignite their series in the future. I think that's kind of a little silly that they don't wrestle. Men's basketball. This is what, maybe I went on a little bit of a tangent here, Rob, and this is related to the schedule. And, we went over it. I bitched about it for a while, about they don't play anybody. I quoted Judge Smales saying, you'll get nothing and you'll like it. Talking about Iowa fans. None of the non-conference teams come to Carver with lower than a 236. Now, we talked about it last week with John, about all the traffic we get once in a while from people about the Big Four or playing home and home with the in-state teams. I'm kind of agnostic about it. I mean, I look at it and say, it's not Iowa's responsibility to make the other teams feel good about themselves. But if you're going to play, if every single home team coming to Carver has lower than a 230, as a worse 236, net, then maybe you need to take that on the chin a little bit and say, all right, well, if you're not going to play anybody good, then maybe it's time to go back to playing Drake and UNI. And so I crabbed a little bit about that too. And I also dinged Iowa State because they deserve it equally. They were just as pathetic as Iowa.
What was the feedback on Iowa basketball, just in terms of did you solicit recommendations for who they'd like to see Iowa basketball play? Because I feel like basketball, they do that more than football. You get a little bit more odd matchups just because there are so many teams and so many events and they play so many games. It's harder for football.
Yeah, it is. And football is hard because you have a finite amount of games, 9 in the Big Ten, 12 overall. And then you have the Iowa State. And then it's like, nobody plays 11 Power 5. I mean, there's like 3 or 4 teams that play 11 Power 5s. So what people had asked about were home and homes like Arizona and Kansas, going to the Palestra to play, the Great Alaska Shootout, Battle for Atlantis. So it was really more about just, it wasn't as detailed, certainly as wrestling or football, which kind of, I think, is a concern that people aren't quite as invested in some of these things. But I think when we look at the ACC Big Ten Challenge going away, it opens up the possibility of playing somebody like that. And so you should
they've played Duke, they've played North Carolina. I mean, they've played some of those blue blood teams. They've played Kansas, although it's been quite a while. They'll get UCLA now.
Yeah, you'll get UCLA. You'll have marquee in-conference teams. So, there's kind of the fact of, playing Michigan State at home is a marquee game. Playing.
You want me to throw mine out there?
Yeah, go for it.
It's Missouri.
Yeah.
I mean, that one was fun. I mean, it's a relatively short trip for fans of both schools to be able to travel to the other one. Mm-hmm. Seems like a natural to me. Or Kansas. I mean, Kansas is fine too.
Yeah, it's not that much further. It's probably easier drive, even though it might be a little longer. I mean, Columbia is, I've been there a million times. But, there's other, people were some were provincial. They wanted Cal State Bakersfield because they live in California and stuff like that. But really, it's Hawaii,
Yeah.
But going to Maui is not a bad idea. Once in a while, Kentucky was another one.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's opportunities there, and Kansas, Missouri, they're regional. Creighton's a good game. You're going, but again, it's on the road. You're not bringing those games to Carver Hawkeye Arena, where you're asking your fans to pay money. Now, the Big Ten, and next year, as you mentioned it, if you get UCLA and Maryland and Michigan State and Indiana and Wisconsin and Ohio State and stuff at home, yeah, that's quality right there, no question. But you also want variety, and you want, and it's really unfortunate the year that they played North Carolina in the Big Ten ACC Challenge, that nobody could watch it. But like last year playing Duke in Madison Square Garden was great, but it's a Madison Square Garden.
Right.
You got to do something for your fans. Women's basketball, there's probably more ideas passed on that. It usually was brought up playing LSU, South Carolina, or UConn. Yeah. But Iowa did play all three of them last year. Some fans brought up playing them in Maui, New York City, Rucker Park. Here's one idea that I had, and this was organize a C. Vivian Stringer Classic in either Brooklyn or Madison Square Garden on Martin Luther King Jr. Day. You honor a coaching legend, and you bring in, say, 6 to 8 elite women's programs to play consecutively on a holiday. You're honoring an all-time great at a main location. It can be televised, and then you bring in Iowa, LSU, UConn, South Carolina, Indiana, who's really good, just whoever, Tennessee,
Virginia Tech,
Rutgers, because of, Vivian Stringer, whatever. I think, to me, that would be a great way to honor her and also bring her up, but and then have a quality tournament. Because I think if you're getting into January, that's the problem with a lot of these exempt tournaments, in my opinion, Rob. When they're in November and December, nobody's watching.
Yeah.
They're just there. If the game's on a Sunday, it's NFL season. If the game's on a Saturday, you still got college football overtones.
Yeah.
So baseball, there was Field of Dreams was brought up. But the problem is with Field of Dreams, as you can imagine, if you were to play that in the spring, I can't think of a more miserable place on earth to play baseball. Can you imagine the wind?
Yeah, you don't have the corn to block the wind.
I know. In March or April, let's say mid-April, and it's an average day, which would be like 51 degrees with 15 to 20 mile an hour winds with no corn blocking it. Give me, I'd rather not play than play there. So,
aesthetically, it's not the same either. It's nothing like it looks like you're out in the middle of a field with nothing in it.
Yeah, it sucks. So what I said was, yes, it's not the time of year you'd want to, but why not have a fall ball tournament or a fall ball classic in October?
Yeah.
The games don't count on the record, but if you were to have 2 or 3 days worth of baseball games involving 8 teams, maybe 6 or so from the Big Ten and maybe a couple others. And then you have, call it like the Golden Harvest Field of Dreams Classic or something like that. Then you could see the corn before it gets harvested. It's got its own little ambiance. Then you're playing at Field of Dreams and it feels like a fun event, and spread the love. It doesn't have to be just Iowa. You can have Minnesota and Nebraska, I'm sure they would enjoy it, or Northwestern and, Co and Dubuque and Loras or something like that. So anyway, that's kind of what I would do. And BTN would love it on a Sunday afternoon in the first or second week of October, and you can air that. So, and finally, I just, there was a couple of people brought up other sports, and Olympic sports that were eliminated got brought up that I just want to see a swimming duel. I just want to see this. And I kind of made my own plug that I really like to see men's swimming and diving return. Do
you get a sense that that's possible, or there's a chance that it could happen with the new AD and I don't know, maybe some reorganization?
I wouldn't see why there wouldn't be an opportunity to revisit it.
Yeah.
Now, gymnastics, to me, I don't know that that's feasible for a lot of reasons, because you start looking at, I was surprised it lasted as long as it did. When you look at men's tennis, maybe, but swimming and diving, to me, that was the one that like cut. It was like, the butterfly stroke was invented in Iowa, and they've had, history there, championships and gold medal or Olympic medals and stuff. And you already have a great pool. And, I can't imagine that it would, I think this is one opportunity that whether it's Beth Getz or whoever follows Gary Barta, and if people want to return these, they have an opportunity to say, we will help endow this position and pay this and do that. I think there's an opportunity. How much of a percentage chance would I give it, Rob? 5%, but that's more than I would with Gary Barta.
Yeah, it's tough to bring sports back, man.
Yeah.
Once you take them down. So
yeah,
I know there's still a group out there that's still pushing.
Yeah. Oh yeah, they're pushing pretty hard on Twitter. But I will say, there's the ice hockey crowd. That's not going to happen. Just let that one go.
I like to watch the people skate over at Coral Ridge.
Yeah, and I like watching the club hockey.
Yeah,
it's fun. But men's soccer. If there's a sport that actually makes more sense to me is men's soccer. If you're going to add a men's sport, but frankly, men's swimming and diving is the one that I would say. Yeah, that you already got the infrastructure in place and the history there. If that group can raise enough money and keep it financially viable, it might be worth looking at in the future. But I'm not the AD. I don't have, and one of the things that, as we know, reason why that they're not going to add an ice hockey program or whatever is because you need that money to remain competitive in your main sports.
Yeah.
And if you can't pay for one assistant football coach that you need,
and hockey is expensive.
Mm-hmm.
People don't realize how expensive it is.
It cost the combined total in the red $16 million for the Big Ten's programs, including with Minnesota and all the others. So if Iowa's to add that and you're losing money, you're not making money, probably a couple million, 2 million for men and probably 4 for women. And oh, by the way, that means you can't afford to keep Phil Parker as your defensive coordinator because of that. You've just killed your program. So
whereas you said soccer, you have a really nice facility you've put some money into, cost would be much less.
Yeah. And you've got, and the other thing with swimming partially, soccer for sure is you've got a local recruiting base.
Yep.
And, with soccer, you could probably, I don't even know the scholarships for men's, but half of them could probably come from this region, anywhere from Chicago to the Missouri River. You could have a lot of walk-ons, which means more students paying their own way. And so I don't know, probably 3/4 of your scholarship people could be from the Chicago suburbs to St. Louis to Omaha area, just in that diamond shaped region or whatever, to Minneapolis.
A good piece that Scott posted today on The Athletic. Check that out. He's got a bunch of other stories on there. That's the time of the podcast where I encourage folks to subscribe to The Athletic. It's a great value. You get a lot of stuff for your buck, including Scott stuff. Start there, and then whatever your sport is, auto racing, golf, whatever it is, The Athletic's got you covered all over the country and even out of the country with some soccer, international soccer. I don't do that, but I know a lot of people do. So check that out. And we will be back next week. Did we forget anything? I always have to ask Scott if we forgot anything. Did we forget anything this week?
I don't think so. I had a piece on LeVar Woods a couple days ago.
Yep, check that out.
And there's a lot of discussion and traffic as to whether he said he wants to be a head coach. And that's a kind of a fascinating discussion because a lot of people feel strongly about LeVar that he should follow Kirk Ferentz. That is a separate discussion to me, but I think one that he should be entertained as a possibility for sure. Whether or not he would be the best choice that remains to be determined. But I think you can't disagree at all with the results that he's had in the position groups he's coached and with the people that he's touched while he's there. They all feel very strongly about him. So, I published that on Sunday, but yeah, I would encourage everyone to take a look at that piece.
Yeah, he would definitely be a candidate. It's just a matter of who are the other candidates, and is he the best among them? Yeah. And that's something we're going to probably get to sooner rather than later, because Kirk can't go forever, or maybe he can. I don't know.
You never know. This is year 25. He's 2 wins away from career win number 200. They should have a good team. What does that mean? It could mean nothing. He's never been one that's been hung up on, hey, the 11-2 year is better than the 8-5 year. But because sometimes it feels more rewarding for him to go 8-5 with a team that's deficient than, even winning 10 or 11 games with a team that's got more potential. But anyway.
I get the sense that we're not going to get a lot of lead into his retirement announcement. I think he's not going to announce it that, prior to his final season and do a victory tour. I maybe he does do that, but I think it's just going to be like, we're going to hit November, December. Maybe he lets the university know, so the university has a heads up, but I'm not sure we have a lot of leeway into his announcement.
If I was just make a guess, Rob, it's probably similar to what we dealt with Hayden Fry way back when, which is, and I'm not saying that they're going to have a bad year and that's going to kind of, precipitate it, but, there'll probably be rumors, discussions, more rumors, speculation, more and more. And then finally kind of shutting it down and, maybe gets a bowl game or something like that to compete in one last chance. But it's a tough scenario, somebody like that, who's your all-time winningest coach, who's third in Big Ten victories, to have them, but we still could be, he's still got 5+ years left on his contract. So,
yep.
He's a young 68 as opposed to me feeling like an old 49er. So he's gonna coach this season, and that's all I'm looking at. Yeah.
That's all I'm worried about right now is the season ahead.
Yeah. When you get to be our age, Rob, us old dudes, we're less and less looking at the future and more looking at the present. So.
Take them one at a time. Who knows when I'm done with this? It could be tomorrow as well. So hopefully not, and hopefully we're back next week to talk on the Hawkeye Hotspot podcast. Hopefully, who knows? Maybe I'll be on Threads by then. I'm wrestling with it. We'll see. I may, if you see me on Threads, I gave in to the peer pressure.
It took me about 10 minutes to decide, all right, I'll just go ahead and jump over there, and it might be the life raft off the wreck of the Elon Musk Gerald. So we'll see what happens.
I still find it hard to believe that Twitter's going away, but we'll see. There's a lot of weird shit that goes on in the world these days that I don't see coming. So
after what happened last weekend, it's just unpredictable. And that's the sad part. So
no doubt, but you'll find us somewhere, and you'll find this Hawkeye Hotspot podcast on Hawk Fanatic and all your different platforms, Spotify, Apple, iTunes, whatever the hell it is these days. You'll be able to find this podcast, our flagship podcast with Pat Hardy, is Monday, Wednesday, Friday. I do the mailbag on Tuesdays. Scott and I are here on Thursdays, so you get a Hawk-centric podcast every day of your business week. And then we have some additional podcasts in there. Dallas Jones does a podcast. I do the Prospect podcast that I talked about earlier. So we got you covered for Hawkeye Sports on our podcast feed. So check us out, subscribe, hit the like button, all that shit that the kids say. Have at it. But we thank everybody for listening. Thank you to all of our sponsors, especially for helping us bring you these podcasts for free. Hope you guys have a good rest of your week and weekend. And Scott and I will be back to talk to you next week. Say goodbye, Scott.
Goodbye, Scott.